Now, one of the things that you should be able to tell right off the bat, since this one only has one squared term, you should be able to tell right away it's a parabola. Parabolas only have one squared term, either x squared or y squared. In this case, it's a y squared. So what you want to do is look at your calculator right away. Look at your parabola equation. And this is given to you in standard form on the calculator. You have a y squared problem, and you have a y squared parabola setup. You want to make it look identical to that. So in order to start that, you're going to move the y squareds to one side and all the x stuff to the other side. Y squared minus 12y blank. I'm leaving that blank there because I'm going to have to complete the square. Equals negative 4x minus 4. Completing the square. Half of negative 12 is negative 6. That negative 6 goes in the parentheses because that will be the junk squared part. And what's negative 6 squared? I'm going to add 36 to both sides. Okay. Complete our simplify on the other side. You have negative 4x plus 32. And then you're looking at it, I'm almost done. But when you're talking about a parabola with standard form, you've got x minus h in parentheses on the right-hand side. We don't have that yet. We have to make that. So I have to factor out something. Well, what's the GCF of 4x and 32? Take the negative 4 out. So you're finally wind up with y minus 6 quantity squared equals negative 4 x minus 8. Hopefully at this point is when you guys got it. Where's your center? Is it negative 8, negative 6, or positive 8, positive 6? What's the rules for h and k? It's opposite, so it's 8, 6. Okay. So here's what we do. This is the new part of this. When you go to graph this, 8, 6. When you graph that, I know it's a y squared and it's got a negative term. So is it going to go left or right? Bless you. It's going to go left. So that means we have to figure out what our p value is. I know, according to my generic equation, that the 4p has to equal negative 4. So what's p? In a hyperbola, the distance of parabola. In a parabola, the p value is the distance from the center to the focus. It's going left 1. So that means my focus is at 7, 6. I know it's going this way. The other part on the parabola that we have to label then is just the directrix. The directrix was the opposite of p. What's the opposite of p? 1. So it's 1 more to the right. Remember, it's a vertical line in this case. At x equals 9. And that's what you're going to be completing out. So for a parabola, the only extra ones you have to label out: find the center, 8, 6. Find your focus, 7, 6. Find the directrix, x equals 9. And that's where it goes. Parabolas aren't that bad when you label them through. They're really quite simple. It's the hyperbola with all the junk that gets messy. (52) I have an x squared and a y squared. I have an x squared and a y squared, which means it's not a parabola. Now, I can also say it's not going to be a hyperbola. Why? There's a plus sign there, yeah. Let's say, yeah. There's a plus sign there, which means it's going to wind up being either an ellipse or a circle. So I'm going to set these things up. I'm going to combine where the x squareds, where the x terms together, the y terms together, and move the constant to the other side. just like we were working on last week. So we have x squared minus 6x blank, y squared minus 8y blank, oops, equals negative 24. Half of b and square it, add it to both sides for both of them. Half of negative 6, negative 3. Square it, I'm adding 9. Half of negative 8, negative 4. Square it, and add it to both sides. Circle or ellipse? It's a circle. And again, the reason it's a circle is the denominator for the left-hand side, 1 for both. It's the same value. A and B are the same. So that means that when I'm going to graph a circle, the center is at 3, 4 with a radius of 1. Pretty easy. Square root of 1 is 1. Do you remember the points that you had to put to show a circle? What's the radius? So just go up 1, left 1, down 1, right 1. Label the points.
So you want us to just label 4 points on the test?
Yep, exactly. And that's exactly what you would do. Your 4 points then would be at 3, 5, 3, 3, 2, 4, and 4, 4. You add 1 to the x, you add 1 to the y, subtract 1 from the x, you subtract 1 from the y. It's really easy with circles. Just do that. You're all right. No, you're not. You're sitting right there. What part?
No, not this.
On which part?
No,
You ran away from
Spiritually lost?
yeah.
We'll find your soul.
Two soul for the two souls.
I heard the devil was looking for a soul to steal. He put a fiddle of gold against your soul. Sorry. Anyway, now in this case, this is the one that takes the longest to work through. You could probably notice right away that you've got a minus sign between the x squared and the y squared. So that means it's going to wind up being a what? It's going to wind up being a hyperbola in this case. So again, the first thing you're going to want to do is move your x squared with the x, the y squared with the y, shift the constant over to the right-hand side. In doing that, we wind up with
It's the first time in my life.
that's
so-
true. I like how you jumped out right away. It wasn't me. So at this point, I have moved everything around. But remember, what was the rule for completing the square? What do you have to do first, though? What do you have to make sure? What about A? It's got to be 1. A's got to be 1. So in this case here, I got to take that 9 out. I have x squared minus 8x blank minus 1 y squared minus 8y blank equals, and then I got to remember to put it back in. Plus 9 times something minus 1 times something. Everybody see why I took that negative 1 out? Because again, the a value in that case was negative 1. Okay. You would have less questions if she stops talking to you.
But I understand that.
Wait till you graph. Half of negative 8. Negative 4. There's my term. Square it. What are you going to add to both sides? Works out to be the same thing. Negative 119 plus 9 times 16 minus 16. I do believe you wind up with 9. Divide everything by 9. We have x minus 4 quantity squared over 1 minus y minus 4 quantity squared over 9 equals 1. Do you have to put it over 1 is what you're going to ask?
Yeah.
You don't. I do because now I know which one's going to be a squared or which one's going to be b squared. That's the only reason why I do that, because I know my next step when I go to graph them is to label everything out.
Okay.
If you understand, if you don't write it down, that way you know that it's either a squared or b squared, it could be equal to 1, you're fine. Okay. So now, again, we know that this was a hyperbola because it had a subtraction symbol between the two. This is where things get messy. When you're graphing a hyperbola, we gotta look at our calculator. Which one came first, x squared or y squared? X squared. So this means it's gonna be going left and right. Okay. Since it's gonna go left and right, I'm just gonna kind of. That means that a squared. Well, first of all, my center is at 4, 4. My a squared is 1. B squared is 9. What's A? What's B? Now, when you go to graph these things, that value of A, yes, sir?
Why is it negative 4? Or why minus 4?
It's always opposite.
Or is it? It's actually
Half-
Oh, I didn't know that
You have to factor out the that negative 1 though, but that's why. You have to factor out that negative 1 because that y squared term was negative 1 y squared. In order to keep the square, that's got to be just a positive 1. So we start these graphs. Your center was at 4, 4. Your a value for the hyperbola is, or ellipse or anything, is always the distance from the center to your vertex. So this is opening left and right, so I go right 1, I go left 1. So that means my vertex was at 3, 4 and 5, 4. My co-vertex, even though it's not technically called a co-vertex, we still use it. Same idea.
What is it technically called?
I forgot. It is called something, I forgot what it was called. I will look it up towards the end of the hour, and I'll be more than happy to tell you. So now that b value is the center to whatever that is. Now notice, from the center to move my b value, since this is a left and right one, all I'm doing is changing the y value for the ordered pair. So I'm going to add 3 to this, and subtract 3. So I'm at 4, 7, and 4, 1. Create your little rectangular box. Focus. We got to plot a focus. This was a hyperbola, so is it an a squared plus b squared, or is it a squared minus b squared? Which one is it? Plus. It's plus, and the reason we remember that it's plus is because it's the opposite of whatever that is. Okay, that's the easiest way to remember it. It's always going to be the opposite of it. Okay. Excuse me. It's 1 plus 9 is 10, so c squared is 10, so c will be plus or minus 10. Square root of 10, what is that, a little bit more than 3? Since I'm opening left and right, all I have to do is add that and subtract that to my x coordinate of my center. So here's 1, 2, 3-ish. 1, 2, 3-ish. For plus root 10. That is a legit ordered pair for adding and subtracting in a focus. You just write it in with the radical. You don't have to do anything else besides that. Works just fine. It won't give you, I mean, you'll get a decimal. I just want to see the exact. When you're plotting it close-ish, that's fine. But when you go to the test, I want to see that. Does that make sense? I know we haven't plotted like this yet before. Diagonals, got to make your diagonals. All that's left now is to write the equation of the line for the slant axis, which means we have to remember, is it a over b or b over a for this one? Is it x squared came first? B, yeah. It's going to be b over a. So what we're going to do is we wind up with, oops, I have 3. So my slope for my asymptotes is plus or minus 3. But that's not the equation, because it doesn't go through the origin. What point does that go through? What point does both slant asymptotes go through? 4, 4. And what is 4, 4? It's the center. So what you wind up doing here is once you figure out what the asymptote slope is, you use that with the center, 4, 4, and point slope. You guys ever see it? I wrote it like this before. Y minus k, slope, x minus h. Did you know point slope form was the first thing about h's and k's? Did you know that? So you have y minus 4, 3x minus 12, add the 4, so you get 3x minus 8 for one of them. And then the other one would be y minus 4, negative 3x. Negative 3x plus 12 plus 4, you get 16. So when we get into hyperbolas, there's a ton of stuff going on. We got to remember that we have centers, vertex, covertex, focus, and then we got to worry about writing the equations of the lines for the asymptotes. The arithmetic isn't difficult. There's just a lot of little things to do. Okay?
What do you use those equations for?
Which ones?
Like the spheres and those equations?
That's the equation of the slant asymptotes. That's your asymptotes that they're approaching. What's going to happen, you don't really use them all that often in this class at all. Next year we start talking about eccentricities and things like that, the constants. You will use those equations of the slant asymptotes quite often. So that's why we're doing those things, just to get in the habit of writing out the equation. And it's not like it's tough. You know, you find the slopes anyway. Point slope forms. Piece of cake. Okay. And what's the next one? 54? And then once again, we get to 54, and we've got an x squared plus a y squared term, which means it's either going to wind up being a circle or an ellipse. But if you've been paying attention, I said earlier, we're going to do one of each style. Which one haven't I done yet? Ellipse. What do you think this is going to be? It's going to be an ellipse. What do you think the first thing you're going to do is? Don't lose your book. What do you think you're going to do?
I lost
Get back on track.
I'm trying.
Let's couple this together.
Yeah,
Do people still do that? Put your names on boards and put like a little check mark underneath it? If you get like 3 of them, you get like
Actually,
attention.
right next to it, though, underneath.
How does-
It looks like
how
it's a
does that
fraction.
Actually,
I thought it was like at one point.
This is
Like,
really
really
I thought
big
you were
one.
giving
I used to get my name on the board all the time too. Don't worry, it wasn't just you.
I thought you were writing a score, like Richie won, Murphy 0. What's that?
be like Mr. Murphy 50, Richie.
Miss Green.
Yeah, it's green.
I don't know. I guess I got in trouble.
I would never have guessed you guys in trouble for talking. Ever.
Miss Favorite doesn't fair. Ever.
Anyway. Again, at this point in time, we have to complete the square. Notice that with the x squared terms, you've got an a value that's not equal to 1, so you've got to factor out the 4. Factor out the 4, you have x squared minus 12x blank plus y squared minus 4y blank equals negative 48. And I have to remember to put that back in, plus 4 times something plus something else. What's half of negative 12? 6. So I have 4 x minus 6 quantity squared, add in the 36. What's half of negative 4? Negative 2. You add 4 into both sides. And then lastly, figure out what's on the right. I think it's 100 if I'm not mistaken. We did that one earlier. So then you divide out. So we have x minus 6 quantity squared over 25. Y minus 2 quantity squared over 100. 1. Graphing of the ellipse is relatively easy. Again, first thing you're always going to plot is your center. When I'm looking at my equation, my generic equation for the ellipse in the calculator, it's with the ellipse you have to decide which one comes first. Which one's bigger, excuse me, the a squared or the b squared. Well, the a squared will always be the larger of the two. Where is that one placed? Underneath the x or the y? That means it's stretched which direction?
Number 2, up and down.
It's stretched up and down. Right? So remember, you're looking at the second of the two equations. Start filling in the blanks. We know that our center is going to be at 6, 2. My a squared is 100, so a is plus or minus 10. B squared is 25, so b plus or minus 5. It's an ellipse. Is it a squared plus b squared or a squared minus b squared? Minus. It's minus. Bless you. So what will c squared equal then, guys?
Bruce 75.
C is 75, so c squared is 75. C will be 5 root 3, plus or minus 5 root 3. Okay? Remember, if you guys remember, if you don't know how to do square roots, what you did in the calculator to figure it out? Divide by x squared.
Plus. Plus and 1.
I don't know what's going on.
Does anybody know what's going on?
Does anybody really care?
Ooh. Can you take class?
About time? Sorry, it's song lyrics.
Are we or are we dancers?
I'll get to you on that one. That's bad Chicago reference. So, all right. So our center is at 6, 2. Our a value is 10. We know this is being stretched up and down. So that means my vertices will be above. What doesn't change for the ordered pairs of the vertices when you're thinking about it in terms of the center? Which value won't change? The x or the y?
Yeah.
The x doesn't change. Because it's all in that same x value, you're adding and subtracting to it. Okay? So your center, we already labeled it. So my vertices will be at what? 6, 12, and 6, -8. Add 10, subtract 10. Got coordinated slash lines. Okay.
Zigzag.
Well, we gotta do my, I have to do my co-vertices now.
No, I've never zigzag if you're seeing, when it's on graph. I mean, shut your mouth.
He's not skipping.
Take away.
Give him a strike. Give him a strike.
Come on, it's true. You're going from 2 to 12.
He's not skipping them, he's just not putting in the tick marks.
Oh, I know. See, after I zigzag.
Yeah, give Soraya one. She needs one.
No, she's all right. Co-vertex. The co-vertex is not, it's horizontal, so what doesn't change?
Why?
Y. So y value will both be 2. With this one, I'm adding, subtracting 5 to the x value. So it would be at 1 and 11. There's your ellipse. Lastly, I got to put in the focus. Again, with the focus, all I'm doing is adding it to the y value. Remember, the focus, the vertex, always looking at the focus. So my x value is always going to be 6. It would be 2 plus 5 root 3. It would be at 6, 2 minus 5 root 3. And I will leave it like that. Rough idea of where it's going to be placed. Well, this was at 12, so 2. 5 root 3 is about 8 something, right? 8.5-ish. So 8.5-ish more than 2 would be 10.5-ish. Just so I have a plot on there. And that's what you do. Centers, vertex, co-vertex, foci, diagonal slant asymptotes if needed. Okay. Were there any other the completing the square parts from these problems that you want to double check before I just say what I want you to do tonight is to graph what you have so far. Finish the rest of the graphs. I think there's like 5, only 4 or so left. Okay. Are there any other ones that completing the square you want to double check? We're all right. Use the time now. Keep finishing them out. I want, just like I've been doing here, I want all this info, because come Friday is what we're going to do. Okay? Start it up? Sure. Where's Brittany been? Is she all right?
I killed her.
She ate her.
60?
She tasted good.
Vicious. Number 60. You can tell right away what it's going to be.
Parabola.
Parabola. It's a parabola. It doesn't matter if there's a subtraction there. Notice how there's only one squared term?
And because of that,
Parabola. A parabola only has x squared or y squared. It doesn't have both. Oop. When you look at the graph, or the generic form, it only has an x squared and a y squared. It doesn't, or either or, it doesn't have them combined. So when I go through this one, I'm going to move the x over.
just add the donuts right here.
So I move those two over. Now you take half of negative 20. You get negative 10. You square it, you add 100. So in order to figure out what your p-value is going to want to be, what do you have to do on the other side? Well, hold on. Is it Does it look exactly like this on that side yet? What do you have to do? Okay. How do I get something in parentheses on that side? What are you going to factor out? Oh, I said it. What? Yeah, what happens here is you factor out the 2. So this gives you the information that your center will be at -3, +10, but your p-value, your 4p equals 2, so p is 1/2. So it's open and right, just add 1/2 to the vertex.